What is up, fam? Welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. So, this happened.
I want to make mention of a channel that I discovered. Someone emailed me, like they often do, and was like, Simon, will you check out my YouTube channel and tell me how I'm doing? And almost always, they're pretty bad. This one was incredible. It's called Skill Tree. It's basically about leveling up skills, and it's super entertaining. It's a great watch. It has way too few subscribers, hence why I'm plugging it here. Go check it out. Skill Tree, link below.
It's amazing, and now I know how a Vincero watch feels. Vincero. Luxury handcrafted watches, fair prices. Vincero. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I blacked out for a second. Or was I? Anyways, that was ridiculously cool of him to do. Like, the fact that he'd kind of go out on a limb for some rando on the internet just kind of shows what a cool guy he is. And as a result, my subscriber count almost doubled in like a day. It's amazing to me. So first off, if you are new to this channel, welcome to the Skill Monkeys, my friend. It is always great to add to our numbers, and thank you very much for checking out my channel and liking it enough to subscribe. I really appreciate that. And though I can't pay Simon back in kind and double his millions of subscriber count, I can make a thing to show my appreciation, because that's kind of what I do. I make things. So since he has given me his Simon Whistler stamp of approval and I have a penchant for wordplay, I figured I'll just give him the stamp back. Behold, the Whistler 900 Rapid Approval Device. Patent pending. This sucker is made out of solid walnut and copious amounts of luck that I will profess to be skill from here on out. So stick around to learn how I did it, and we'll level up this skill. Getting started. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, fam, I had no idea how I was gonna accomplish this. So like, I had the picture in my head of what I wanted it to look like, and a really nice piece of walnut. Making the reality and the vision meet without a lathe was really, really hard to do. Luckily, I was recently gifted with this nifty drill press. Thanks, Dad. A few hours of frantic internet research and a trip to Home Depot later, and I had everything I needed to convert my drill press into a ghetto-ass lathe. I'll go ahead and list all of these parts in the description in case you want to try this too. Now, I discovered, aside from like the motor that spins the thing, there are a few really basic pieces to a lathe. So first there's a spindle, which actually holds the piece of wood and spins it. On the other end of the wood, you need a thing called the dead center that holds everything straight and in place. And then you need a tool rest to actually put your tool against the force of the thing spinning. From what I've been able to glean to it, it really helps you maintain like a consistent depth and angle for your chisels. So for my tool rest, I took this Carriage Bolt and washer and secured it to the drill press table with a nut, tightening it into place. Next, I used a straight edge to find the center of both sides of my block, and punched a small divot in those centers with an awl. To give my dead center a place to sit in the block, I used a countersink bit to make a shallow hole in the bottom of the wood. Then, using some tape, I marked the depth of my 3-pronged T-nut and drilled a hole at that depth. Then I hammered the T-nut into place. So obviously the drill press itself is the motor of our lathe. It's the thing that's actually spinning. The little teeth of that T-nut is what's gonna transfer that motion of the drill into the wood. Now, in order to connect that bit to the drill chuck, I just cut the head off of one of my bolts and thread it into place, using a nut to help lock it in. Okay, so now we have the tool rest and the spindle all set up. For my dead center, I just mounted a bolt into my drill. Then I ran it against the belt sander while it was spinning. The finished result was this perfectly even, pointy end. I'm not gonna lie, I was just kind of making that little bit up as I went, and I'm really kind of jazzed how that came out. Like, it's such a simple little point, but it's perfect. It's the little things. Now, using the 2 remaining washers and a nut, I positioned my makeshift dead center in the hole in the middle of my press table. Then I raised the table up and inserted the dead center into the drill chuck before tightening it into place. Okay, so by doing this, I'm ensuring that that dead center is exactly in the center of that drill chuck. Otherwise, if it's a little off center, the piece of wood isn't gonna spin evenly. It's gonna be all kind of wonky and it won't cut straight, I think. Again, I'm making this up as I go. This is my first time lathing something. Is that a word? Lathing. Going with it, lathing. And I'll be damned, it actually worked. I'm not gonna lie, I was half expecting that piece of wood to fly off and take my teeth as a trophy. Okay, so once I was sure it was secure and I got that sucker spinning, it was time to shape the wood. So seeing as I don't have an actual lathe, it goes without saying that I don't have any of the tools and chisels required to lathe. Still going with it. Still gonna be my word today. In fact, all that I actually had for chisels were these ones that came in like a bargain pack at Harbor Freight or Home Depot or some such. But I work hard to keep them damn sharp, so I figured, what's the worst that can happen? Oh God, oh no. That being said, while that block was spinning, I was really nervous to just kind of jam my chisel into those really sharp corners. Because again, I didn't want, oh no. So I started by taking those corners down a little bit on my sander, then a little bit more on my air quotes lathe with a strip of 80 grit sandpaper. Once I felt sufficiently safe, I went for it with my chisel. So figuring out exactly kind of how to angle it so it wasn't like skipping across the wood and bouncing around took a little bit of finagling, but in fairly short order, I was able to make some pretty precise shapes. I was able to remove exactly how much wood I wanted to and in the spaces I wanted to, which is really good because that's the only piece of walnut I had. It's the only piece of wood in those dimensions, so I was kind of rolling the dice on this one, guys. Now I had sandpaper left over from my Dragon Ball project that ranged all the way from 60 grit to 7,000 grit. So I figured, working my way up, I was able to get this piece glass smooth. That's 7,000 grit, yo. That is super overkill. You don't need to do that. You could get away with like, I don't know, I'd go up to like 400 grit. That would get you sufficiently smooth. Was it overkill? Absolutely, but that's how a skill monkey says thank you, damn it. All right, so from there, I wanted to remove some of the material that was on the top and the bottom. To do that, I used the corner of my chisel to cut a groove out where I wanted to separate the wood. Then I used that groove as a guide for my Japanese handsaw. And a special thank to Rockin' R's Woodshop for that one. So he's on the group Discord, which you should totally check out. And I know on his channel, he does a lot of lathe work. And I had no idea how I was gonna separate those pieces cleanly. So I'm like, 10 o'clock at night messaging him being like, bro, how do I do this? Apparently, the correct tool for the job is something called a parting tool. With it, you can use the lathe spinning to actually cut the piece. Since I didn't have that, he's like, yeah, just mark it and cut it with a saw. You'll be fine. Thank you for assuaging my fears. I really didn't want to ruin this piece. Anyway, with that all freed up, I sanded the ends until they matched the rest of the body. Look at how glass smooth that is. It's beautiful. So okay, let's just recap the episode thus far. We've converted a drill press into a lathe for like under $5. And then we use that lathe to shape a beautiful piece of walnut. Honestly, I had no idea if that would work or not, so I'm kind of feeling a little smug with how fast that came out. It just worked. Like, it worked well. All right, now that I've had a good stretch just patting myself on the back, it's time to move on to making a stamp. So it turns out making a rubber stamp is super easy and satisfying, like stepping in freshly fallen snow satisfying. All you need is some soft rubber and some tools to carve it with. For the rubber, I grabbed this carving block from Amazon, but I read that if you wanted to, you can just use like an eraser. Feels almost exactly the same. I also bought this linoleum carving kit from Speedball to actually carve my design into the rubber. But I imagine you could actually probably do most of this with like an X-Acto knife if you're careful. And after a bit of digital stalking, I was able to print out this badass SW logo that's featured prominently behind Simon in many of his videos. I'm assuming it's his personal logo, so that's what I'm going with. Now to get this design onto the rubber, I used some 100% acetone that I may or may not have stolen from my wife. First, I taped down the edge of the logo just to stop it from smudging. Then I add a thin coat of acetone to the rubber, and finally to the back of the paper. The acetone melts the ink, effectively printing the image onto the rubber. You'll notice that the image is backwards on the rubber. You want it that way so that when you stamp it, it's the right way. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything. Aw, man. It was like midnight at that point, and I was real upset. Now simply carve away the rubber around your design. I found this part to be crazy relaxing. The rubber cuts like butter, like there's almost no resistance in it. So just go really slow and kind of enjoy the process. Now, because I wanted my rubber stamp to be really low profile, I cut my rubber in half widthwise, leaving only about 1/4 inch thick stamp. I then tested it out before moving on. I was super jazzed with how clean those lines came out. Like you're just kind of carving away at rubber, and I didn't expect the actual print to look as crisp as it did. Came out really nice. I was proud of it. Now to make sure the stamp leaves a more even imprint, it's a good idea to back it with foam. And I just so happen to have some pieces of foam left over from when I built my sword. Using bar cement, I painted some onto the foam and the back of my stamp. Then after waiting 15 minutes, I pressed them together for an instant, permanent bond. Then to clean it up, I cut away the excess foam. Now I wanted the stamp to be an image on the top as well, so that when you go to press it down, you know what orientation the actual stamp itself is in. To accomplish this, I just loaded the stamp with ink and pressed the top of the handle down on it, leaving a perfect impression. Now noting which way was up, I marked the opposite side with an arrow for direction. Then I positioned the stamp in place and traced it with a pencil. Since I went so extra with my sanding, I decided to rough up that area before applying the barge cement to both the wood and the back of the stamp. Once cured, I carefully lined up the stamp and made the bond. Again, this is a contact cement, so once they touch, that's where they stay, so just make sure you position it right where you want it. I also decided to blacken any of the pink of the rubber just for aesthetic purposes. Now at this point it was nice and all, just a little boring. Now to jazz it up a little bit, I decided to add these pretty upholstery tacks. But first I decided to trim them down a little bit because that would be nuts to try to push through solid walnut. Then I evenly marked where I wanted each stud to land and partially drilled a small starter hole, finally hammering my stud into place. Then just rinse and repeat. So I didn't want to cover up any of the grain and stuff, so I was reticent to put any kind of design on there. I think this little thing though just kind of makes it pop and gives it a really like reading a good book by a fireside while drinking a whiskey kind of look. Just kind of smart and refined, which is what I was going for because this is for Simon Whistler. It's kind of what he does. Speaking of small extra bits, I decided to take one of my cut off ends and hollow out its center with a Forstner bit. So now after you finish stamping, you don't have to worry about getting the ink like on your desk or anything because it fits right into this little holder here. Right here. Always thinking. Plus it looks fetching on a table. Now to put a bow on this whole project and help protect it from the elements, I opted to use Danish oil. So this is like a penetrating wood oil with a bit of varnish mixed in, and this one I particularly got has some dye mixed into it as well. So it's kind of a pretty cool theory. What happens is the varnish catches a ride with the oil and gets deep into the grain. Then it hardens inside the grain. So rather than just having kind of a surface layer that's hardened, the piece itself is actually hardened a bit. And then also because the one I chose has like a darker dye in it, that dye just kind of settles in the grain and really makes the grain pop. All you have to do is rub it on and then let it sit for like 15 minutes so that it penetrates the grain. Then rub it back off. The only downside is after that, you need to wait about 8 hours before you could either reapply the next coat or put a top coat on. For this project as a top coat, I decided to use a finishing wax. I just kind of like that kind of antique hand polished luster that the wax gives, and it's super easy to apply. You just put on a thin coat, you let it dry for about 5 minutes, and then you come back with a rag cloth and you buff it. And bam, check that out. Classy, elegant, refined. Whistler 900. So okay, for my first time like wood turning and stamp making, I couldn't be happier. I really liked the shape of it. I like the style of it. The stamp comes out really clear, which I'm especially happy about because again, this was like my way of showing gratitude. So if it came out like hell, I would have been really upset about it. And honestly, I really am extremely grateful. That shout out and the jump in my subscriber count, it brings me closer to like the ultimate goal of just doing this, you know, making videos for my community. And if I could do that full time, it'd be incredible. And this brings me a little bit closer to that. So I really, really do appreciate that. Now, because I know that it is physically impossible that somebody does 5 or 6 YouTube programs and like a podcast, there just isn't enough time in a regular human being's life, which means Simon Whistler's a Time Lord. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave this right here. And you just kind of just pop in and grab it whenever. As for the rest of you, I hope you enjoyed that project. If you did, hit me with that thumbs up love, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bells so you know when I release new content. Also, if there's any skills you want to see me cover, leave it down in the comments and I will add it to the list. Oh, and just a heads up, because I'm over 1,000 subscribers, I now have a community tab somewhere, which means I can do things like post the entirety of the list and have you guys vote on the next things you want me to work on. So expect that to be coming soon because that's awesome. All right, and if any of you are subscribed to my channel and you happen to not be subscribed to any assignments, I highly recommend you check them out. Link to all of his channels will be in the description below. There's a lot of them. But if you're here, you're probably into learning cool stuff, and if you're into learning cool stuff, you'll like basically everything he has to offer. All right, well, I should get going. I like that stamp so much that I want to make one for my... Where the... In the meantime, keep leveling up, you.